The Blaze, written and narrated by Caleb Merriquin. The seas did speak to Walter, yet its ominous tune fell on reluctant ears. An ice-cold fear of those salty waves crept up his spine as the fog snaked across the shore. That invisible frost let the old man some ease. It's merely the cold, he whispered, shivering. Nothing more. His gaze briefly lingered on the cracked white brick of the lighthouse, but he quickly got back to work. Yet, even as he reassured himself, he made no attempt to look upon the incoming tide. A deep gray settled over his abode, a thick blanket of lethargy that ascended even up to the peak of the foreboding ivory tower. Accursed thing, the keeper muttered, his voice snatched away by the waves, as if they were starved. He spoke no louder than a whisper. The fear of those waves listening, however improbable, had a looming presence in his mind. Thus, he toiled in the midday fog, careful not to peek at those icy waves as they crashed, the heavy crests leaving foam on that dreary shore. A rotten stench rose on the newfound breeze. The old man's lips trembled as he looked upon the overcast sky. A storm fast approached from the east. With it, the dreaded night. A worrisome amount of gulls flew overhead, their cries of delight disconcerting as they dove into the dark depths. Something caught Walter's watchful eye as he scanned the foam cautiously. A large piece of wood, emblazoned with dark lettering. His face wrought with fear, Walter rushed inside. Hours passed as he sat in silence, shivering despite a smoldering fire in front of him. He poked at it restlessly as his teeth chattered. Every creak that shattered the silence earned a quick survey of the small room he was sequestered in. A suffocating anxiety plagued Walter. It was made much worse by the sudden crack of lightning. That awful feeling persisted and hung in the air as the last needles of sunlight were swallowed by the sea. With a shaky breath, he drummed his fingers on his wooden chair, mulling over his yet-to-be-had arduous journey. With a rather gaunt face, he snatched a coat and made his way out the door. Quick steps were drowned out by the immense downpour. Scurrying towards that formidable structure, he pulled the cloak tighter to shield himself from the chill. A flash of lightning illuminated the waves as Walter made haste. Barely containing a cry of fear, he sprinted as fast as his knobbly knees would carry him. Throwing open a slippery old door, he bolted inside as if the eyes of the sea were focused on the pathetic man. His breath broke the quiet of the room as his eyes darted around wildly scanning the dark, not nearly satisfied that he was alone, but with little time to waste, he began his careful, tedious ascent. 47 steps, the second and 37th squeak. Complete and utter darkness wrapped around him as he tentatively touched his gnarled old boot on the first step. One, he said so inaudibly, it perhaps didn't actually make a sound, but it thundered through Walter's mind. He reached his foot over the second and touched the third. 3. This continued for some time, until the last, blessed step came. Despite the chill in the air, the grizzled old man was covered in a sheen of salty moisture. He was unsure if it was sweat or tears. At last he stood before a simple wooden door, yet the man's terror had his heart in a firm embrace. He knew what agony awaited. Eyes glazed with fear, pupils dilated so that the earthy brown was swallowed whole by inky blackness. Walter slowly raised a shaky hand, pushing open the door. Pale tapestries of moonlight danced around him, reflecting off the glass of the lighthouse. An eerie silence descended, prevailing over the relentless storm. Fumbling in his trousers, he pulled a matchbook free, Hands quivering, he held them with a terrible fear, as if striking them was a terrible deed. Holding one aloft, he brought it down with a whimper. A sharp hiss followed as a ghostly orange light barely held down the pressure of the dark. "Please," he said, his voice barely penetrating the quiet. He threw the match in the oil. A great fire erupted as he leapt towards the floor. He glanced towards that obsidian tide, revealed only by that hellfire. Hundreds of ghastly faces stared back at him from beneath the waves, welcoming him to their cold embrace. They seemed to dance in the tide, unaffected by their shredded bodies. "No!" he shrieked in fright, trembling as the corpses called. "Please, please forgive me!" he wailed, as he doused the fire and curled up on the floor, whimpering pitifully. The storm could not drown out the screams and crashes as the starving sea pulled more unlucky to their domain. The end.